In the October Mums at the Table magazine, we meet parents Adrian and Jane as they face the reality that their son Fraser has been labeled failure to thrive. It's a nail-biting article that will take you through all of the emotions of a parent facing the fear of the possible death of their newborn. Melody, I just want to know, what was going through your mind as you were reading this article?
I think the main thing that really struck me was how they actually ended up relying more on God, because usually in situations like this, right, you're raging towards God, going, "Where are you, God? Why are you doing this to me?" But instead, they actually end up getting stronger faith and experiencing this more reliance on God.
Yeah.
Did you find it was this instant thing, though? As I was reading the article, I kind of felt like sometimes I think in some Christian literature, it makes it sound like people go immediately from this point of fear to faith, as though it was this,
It's a process. That's what I've found. It's always been a process. And I think sometimes we can mix up fear with anxiety, and sometimes we can be feeling anxious. And I know in times of life when I felt really fearful, I felt God's presence really closely as well. So I think we can trust in God at the same time as feeling fear. And the fear may be there, but I've prayed for peace. And I've had peace sitting there next to my fear.
And I think it's okay to be fearful. I think that sometimes we get hung up on the fact that fear is a bad emotion. It's not. For me, when I've felt fear, I've found that was the driving force to make me find God, to question why God's putting me through these things, why, what was the outcome. And when you look back, you actually see that God was carrying you through those situations and guiding you and looking after you. Without going through that fear, you would never have had that peace of mind.
Isn't that one advantage of being older? I say to my girls sometimes, you know, when they don't know what God wants them to do, they're feeling fearful about their future. I said, when you get through, you can look back and you can see what God's done. I love in the article how she talks about God promises our daily bread. He doesn't promise our yearly bread. And that's what I find when I'm going through something really tough and scary, is that I trust God just for that day. Just get me through that day.
Or just for that minute, if that's all you can do.
And get me through that week. And then I can look back and I say, yep, God was there that week.
So go ahead.
I was just thinking about one of the really striking memories I have of this fear and faith. It's actually about my dad. He passed away when I was 18, so it was like 20 years ago now. And he had cancer, and he was going through a lot of pain. He actually decided that he didn't want to go through chemotherapy. But one of the best images I have of him is he's at that point of time he was really emaciated. He was really, really, really sick, and you knew he was in pain. But I'll come into the hospital room, and he'll sit there in bed. He'll be sitting up and he'll be looking at a poster on the wall, and it's actually of God, and he would just be smiling. And it was just looking at that and knowing just the amount of, you know, there's that fear that there's death coming, and well, it's certain that death is coming. But yet he had that faith and that joy and that peace, and just knowing that there was God there with him.
I think for me, a lot of fear is the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
You know, and that's... you think you've got your life sorted, you think you know what's going to happen, and so suddenly life throws something unexpected, and it happens to everybody. And then just trusting God to be okay, not knowing what you think is going to happen, but you know that God's got you back.
What's that Bible text in, I think it's Philippians, about faith is not seen, or we stand by faith, you know, we have God and he's there. We don't necessarily have to see him. And I think that's what fear does for us. We can't see God per se, but through feelings like fear and anxiety and depression and all these other things, we can see God. We can see his work.
You know, there was one quote that really stood out to me, and I think it kind of, you know, encapsulates everything we're saying, but it's just, yes, we resist fear, but the way we fight it is to learn from it, and by first facing it so that it loses its paralyzing effect. So I think, as you were saying, your girls are scared of that unknown, and it's like we fear because we don't know what's ahead of us. So it's like when you face it head on and you actually ask yourself, I think sometimes we have to ask ourselves, like, what is it that I'm actually scared of? Like, what is the worst thing that could happen in this scenario? And in that scenario with your father, it was like, I guess he knew that death was pending, you know, but when he faced that reality, it was like, you know, as we start facing it, I guess it starts losing that paralyzing effect, you know?
Yeah, we don't need to have fear control our lives. I think it's there, and we deal with it and we trust God, but it doesn't have to control everything we do.
Yeah, and it is that constant reminder. Like, it is that reminder that we continue to go back to him and to, deal with that fear that we're facing. Well, I guess at one point or another, we all will face fear. Some people cling to their faith. And what is it that you do when you're feeling afraid? We'd love to hear about it on our social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, Mums at the Table.